Hello and a very warm welcome. One of the things that became most apparent when there was a tense military confrontation between India and China was the need to decouple the Indian economy from the Chinese economy to the extent possible to reduce economic dependence on China. Now, this is easier said than done, but to what extent can this be achieved, and is this really in India's long-term economic interest to cut the business umbilical cord with China to the extent that is possible? What's being done on the ground across corporate India and in government, and what's the roadmap going forward? To talk about this hugely pressing issue, I'm joined on this broadcast by three special guests from corporate India. I want to start by introducing our Mukundan, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Tata Chemicals. With us also is Pawan Goenka, Managing Director, Mahindra & Mahindra, Baba Kalyani, Chairman and Managing Director of Bharat Forge. And for a perspective from government to get a sense of how many global companies are looking at investing in India, whether there is actually a move away from manufacture in China to make in India, and what are we doing to try and capitalize on this, I am joined by the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the government's flagship Invest India program, Deepak Bagla. So welcome to all our guests, and I just want to lay out for our guests and for our audience that I want to start by getting all of you to talk a bit about your individual companies and your sectors, the extent to which your manufacturing lines and your output is currently dependent on China, and what you are doing to try and reduce that economic dependency, if anything is being done at all. How important is this for you? So let me put that question first to Pawan Goenka. Dr. Goenka, if you can start and explain for Mahindra & Mahindra and for the automobile sector, the extent to which your company and your sector is dependent on China, how you perceive the problems between India and China militarily and on the economic front, and what are you doing to try and reduce this economic dependency? Let's start with Dr. Goenka.
Thanks, Rahul. Clearly, this is a subject that is being debated a lot these days. Let me say that auto industry's dependence on China in India is not as much as many other industries. I would say overall, of total consumption that auto industry has of input material, probably about 5% or so comes from China. And for Mahindra, it's even less, maybe about 2.5–3% comes from China. Having said that, 5% is 5%, and if the 5% stopped coming tomorrow, then almost every automotive plant in India will come to a grinding halt, because many of these components that come from China are single source, and therefore we cannot run our plants. Now, how important it is, how we can move out of it, I think that in auto industry, there's almost nothing that we cannot move out of China. That means given time, we can start making these things in India, or we can start procuring from other countries. The problem is that it's going to take time. It's not something that we can change overnight. And it probably won't even be prudent for us to say that we should completely cut off from China, because there's few things that China does very well that no other country can match up with China on, and few things that China we have just depended on and we can easily move out. So I would say that the target that we have taken in Mahindra, and in fact I have even asked the auto industry to take the same target, is to reduce dependence of China by about half in the next 2 to 3 years. If we can cut down by half, and that's not a small amount, because today the import from China is about $5 billion, out of total import of about $17–18 billion in the auto industry. And some of it is because of, in fact, a lot of it is because of low cost. Chinese components are 10 to 15% lower cost than components landed in India for what gets imported. And for this, we have to look at how do we match up to China's cost in India. It can be done, but it has to be a focused effort of the industry and of the government together on how do we bring our cost at par or even lower than China, because there's no reason why India should not be lower cost, but we are not in many cases. Some things are where China is part of a global...
We'll build on this. Let's just do it one by one. We'll build on this. I want to go across to Mr. Baba Kalyani, because you've got interests across forgings, automobile composites, steel, specialty chemicals, construction. So give us a sense of how you view and to what extent all your varied interests are dependent on China, and how important it is for you to try and reduce this dependency, and what are you doing about it, Mr. Kalyani?
Well, thanks, Rahul. First of all, a pleasure to be on this show. The answer to your question is, in our business, we don't import anything from China. Matter of fact, it's the other way around. But China is a market for us to whom we export products. So we have nothing in terms of what we import. Actually, we import very little. Most of our products are made here in India. So we don't have a problem of trying to shift our supply chains, because all our supply chains are local. I think the problem for us is how do we grow our business in terms of exports to China, because that is beginning to look a little difficult with the current geopolitical situation that we have between our two countries. And that's the real problem that we see, at least for our business going forward.
Okay, so you're saying it's not so much about imports, but how exports to China can potentially get impacted. Let me put that question next to our Mukundan from Tata Chemicals and get your sense of your current dependency on China, the sector's dependency on China, and efforts being made to try and reduce that, sir.
Thanks, Rahul. I think you would have already heard it's been much publicized in the media too. Some sectors of chemical industry, which is agrochemicals and pharmaceuticals, there is dependence on some critical chemicals from China, and these are very critical building blocks. And as you know, that every country specializes in certain stage of manufacturing, and China has taken position in certain intermediates, which it has a very large market share. Also, it is not a question of percentage, in my view. For example, Tata Chemicals itself does not import much from China. In fact, we import one small chemical, which is hardly even less than 0.5% of our requirement. But that 0.5% is critical. So the alternate source would have been from Europe. When this Wuhan virus, the coronavirus this pandemic started in Wuhan, we started planning how do we and the manufacturer was right there in Wuhan itself. And we had to plan how do we get alternate supplies from Europe. So what changed at that point of time was this entire focus about moving to resilience rather than efficiency. So we've been thinking about this. You're right that there is dependence in some sectors on China or a single source. And in going forward, I think companies will be very deeply thinking about whether they can depend just on one source or we need multiple sources for some of the critical products.
In this crisis, Deepak Bagla, is there an opportunity? You speak to companies globally. Is there an enhanced interest because countries want to reduce their dependence just on Chinese supply lines? Is there genuine change that you see between earlier and now about companies wanting to come into India?
Rahul, let me start with a few statistics. We closed 31st March this year with an FDI of $74 billion. If you remember when we met at Davos in January, I said it's going to be a record year. It's the highest ever FDI we've got in our history. Now, why did we get that? What I believe has happened in the past 128 days of this lockdown over this virus is that it has amplified and catalyzed some of the underlying trends which were already there. And primary of them being de-risking. De-risking was a business strategy which over time we tended to overlook. And as was rightly pointed out, it was efficiency looked at in a way of making it cheaper, which had overtaken certain scenarios. What this little parasite has done is, or this virus has done, is actually brought that out in the fore. And now each and every corporate entity across the globe is going back to the age-old principle of de-risking. That means onshoring closer to where the markets are and also shortening the supply chains. The supply chains have become very long. And these are one of the two trends which we are seeing very actively right across. What has happened with us?
But companies also have the choice of wanting to go to Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, elsewhere. How many of them seem at this moment interested in coming to India? That's the question. Can you throw some statistics around that as well?
So sure on that one, Rahul. See, the thing is, every country and every economy has their strengths and imperatives. I think the imperatives of India are extremely strong. The imperative is the largest market. We are still the largest market. We'll still probably just move out of this very quick to be the fastest growing. We still remain the youngest. These are very strong imperatives for anybody who has to take a business decision on going forward. And those are the strengths which are drawing the number of people which are coming to us. Let me just give you this statistic came to me this morning. Let me just share with you. It is from FDI Markets data of Financial Times. And it is about US companies which moved to China and US companies which moved to India during the past 3 years. Let me give you the statistics on that one. 2017, you had 172 companies moved to India, 170 to China. 2018, 187 to India, 202 to China. 2019, 199 to India, 185 to China. 2020, this is here already, I've had 38 here and 22 which have gone to China. This is not my statistic. This is a statistic which is by a third party, FDI Markets data, which is what I thought I'll just share with you for the moment. But coming back to that, I'm already working with close to 575 companies with a dedicated relationship manager with each one of them, who are now at a very serious point of grounding their investments or starting their commercial productions, or in that phase where India is concerned. What has happened in the past 128 days, which I speak of, and more so in the past 95 days, that the number of investor interests which have come up have gone up exponentially. And in fact, the queries coming in now are no longer about the India opportunity. The queries are, please show us where we can start our business. Show us which state we can go to, which is the land, and how can we just help us with our approvals.
I just want to see if the top CEOs that we have share the sense of enthusiasm. And let me put that question to Baba Kalyani first. You know, the government has been saying that this is a great opportunity, and it is, but there have been opportunities in the past as well that companies now want to de-risk, and they do. But do you see these companies wanting to come to India, or will this once again be a lot of talk, good talk in the right direction, but very little actual implementation which brings the big bucks here? Baba Kalyani.
No, I think, Deepak Bagla is very right. There is tremendous amount of enthusiasm in companies across the world, whether it's the East, in Japan, Korea, or whether it's in Europe, or whether it's in the United States. In various different industries, whether it's pharma industry, whether it's electronics, whether it's the defense sector or the aerospace sector, there is just tremendous amount of interest. And I think the underlying reason for this high level of interest are fundamentally three basic factors. The biggest factor is there is a defined policy from the government, iterated none other than our Honorable Prime Minister, which talks about this whole concept of creating a resilient India through his Atmanirbhar mission. And I think he's laid down some very basic structures that will bring reform in industrial growth in almost every sector. So this is number one. Number two, I think there is a huge amount of talent that is available in this country compared to many other countries. And I think the Indian talent is probably the single biggest reason as to why companies will want to bring their investments into India and grow. And third, of course, is this entire factor of decoupling from doing everything in China. I think everybody is looking for an alternative. India is one of the alternatives. Not everything will come to India. But I think if we pitch ourselves well, which we are doing today, you will see a lot of investments come.
Mr. Mukundan, do you feel that as well? That it's not just talk, there is genuine interest about wanting to move production lines out of China, yes, but to India. Do you feel that at this moment? Is that the sense that you're getting in all the conversations you're having globally?
I think what I would say is that we are in a better position than what we were a couple of years ago, certainly. But I think if you ask me a question, should we do more? And I think we should do more. That is really and I think the conversations we are having with government also point in the direction.
What more would you like to see?
So certainly it goes back to the same thing, Rahul, which has been the issues we've been saying from time and time again, which is basically the 3 L's, which is the land, labor, and legislation. These 3 things need, and I think highly already Mr. Bagla has pointed out the land bank has been identified. They know which state to go to. I think those are all right steps. If you look at the legislative process with which someone needs to go through in terms of starting a unit or even running a unit, I think we need to simplify. I think there's an effort now being done to simplify processes through digitization. The other L, which is the 4th L, is logistics. India has a huge issue with logistics, our port efficiency, our efficiency of road transportation. Railways have done a commendable job during this period. Ports have done a terrific job during this difficult period. But I think we need to become more efficient. Then there are two E's which are very important for us, which is energy. Energy costs we need to address. It's coming down. We know that renewable costs have been coming down, and we need to make it more cost effective. And lastly is our environment-related rules and regulations need to be made more modern, and I think they are getting modernized with this Pravesh website which has been launched by government and Parivesh website which has been launched by government. So I think steps are coming in the right direction. So we should never lose sight of the fact that we are on a journey, we are improving, but there's a lot more to do. And I think there needs to be increased consultation between the investors who are coming in, the existing investors who are in, as well as the existing businesses who are in terms of making their life easy and making their life better. Because I think this whole concept of that it's not a static element. As we move, other countries are also moving. They're also making their ease of business much better than what we are. So I think we need to constantly keep upping the game, and there are tools available, and I think this engagement is very good. The second thing I think government also has done is that now it has recognized that the whole process of reciprocity is very important in trade relationship. I think that is a second element which government has started to recognize, and that has actually made certain companies in Japan and Korea, where there is already an existing pact that they need to build local manufacturing here. So you will get these investors to come in. So we are going to see this increasingly moving forward. There's also a talk of easing that trade relationships with the US, which I think is a big move.
Now, Pawan Goenka, you can see the glass half full and half empty, depending on your own perception. The good thing is that companies want to de-risk, move part of their manufacturing lines out of China, and therefore there is that opportunity. The flip side, though, as Mr. Mukundan points out, is that other countries too are in the same game. They are making it easier in India. In any case, you've got Indian companies and those who've already invested dealing with excess capacity, low demand. At this point, do you think internationally companies are wanting to make a new play in India, or is this a country that they've been trying to come into, some have burned their fingers, and therefore they say, yes, we want to move out of China, but not necessarily to India? How are you viewing this? Pawan Goenka.
Okay, so let me say that the statistics that Deepak has talked about, of course, they are very encouraging. I don't have access to those. But from everything that I'm hearing from government circles, it appears that there is a renewed interest in investing into India. What I can say is in the last 122 days, I think Deepak said, in 122 days, the kind of engagement that we are having with the government, both at the ministerial level and at the officers level, to make an honest attempt to increase manufacturing in India, both of new investment coming from outside and also to be able to leverage what we already have on the ground, is something that I have not seen in a long, long time, or something I can say I have not seen before. And the kind of focus.
In what way has it changed?
So in the last 4 months or so, we have picked specific sectors. In fact, we have looked at 12 sectors right now. And in these sectors, the industry has made specific recommendations on what needs to be done. And I'm happy to say that in many of these sectors, the ministries, line ministries, both again minister level and officer level, are actually having meetings every week to try and focus into each of these items and start making changes. You would have heard the Prime Minister talk about the furniture industry, the leather footwear industry, the air conditioner industry, and actually things are happening on the ground right now. So it is not just talk. Of course, all of us would like to see more than what's happening, as Mukundan said, and there's a lot more that can be done. But the effort that is being put in right now today, I have been involved in this manufacturing industry for a long time, and I can tell you that while one can say that previously it's been more talk than action, but I can say today that talk and action are perhaps equal. And like the ease of doing business, as Mukundan said, everybody is moving forward, and we need to continue to move. We cannot say that we are done. There's a lot that we need to do. But I would say that there is a serious attempt to.
So in this part of the conversation, I now want to shift attention to what's been done so far from the government side when it comes to decoupling from China. So we know that 56 plus 47 apps have been banned, 250 more apps are in the government's radar. That's a digital surgical strike of sorts. Then you've got Indian government companies and contracts now not being given directly to China, a lot more vetting, a lot more scrutiny there. Let me start with Deepak Bagla. How effective do you think the measures so far, as far as economic coercion to send a message to China is concerned, how effective has it been in terms of what we've done so far? What more could the government potentially do so that a message goes out to China and internationally? Mr. Bagla?
Rahul, let me just pick up from what Pawan left off. First, let me tell you, in my past 5 years of being here, this is the first time I'm seeing Team India working together. Pawan, Baba Kalyani, Mr. Mukundan, the government, each one of them working together, seeing that this is one of those opportunities we're not going to let go. And what has happened is we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. But there's a long way we've covered already. And let me give you one small instance before I come back to what you were saying. We are running currently the Swayamvar series at Invest India. What we are doing here, we're going sector by sector, getting a series of global serious investors, wherever they be, and then get them to speak to 6 or 7 states directly, the states where they have already said they are looking to invest in. And these states are given 10 minutes each to pitch to them. You know what is happening? One, it is phenomenal. I have investors which are waking up at 2 a.m. in their time zone and spending those 2 hours with us to hear these pitches. Let me tell you another thing. I'm having the chief ministers of these states, the senior functionaries of these states come on and pitch themselves in those 10 minutes for their government, that you come to us. In a recent one, I had a minister say that whatever is the best proposal you have in the world, either I will equal it or I will better it. This is the way India is moving. Now, let me tell you what has happened in the past few days. I told you it was very well established in the global marketplace. We will remain the fastest growing. We are one of the largest markets. We are the youngest markets. What the government has done in the past 90 days, and apart from that, you would have heard, you were talking of the elements of production and you were talking of labor and land. You've already heard a number of state governments come up with unprecedented reforms which have happened on labor, which are happening on the land bank, where we are coming up with now, which is going to happen. But most importantly, I'll tell you, the first, a single window being created at the central government level, headed by the cabinet secretary. It's an empowered group of secretaries, fast-tracking investments. Most importantly, clusters and industrial townships being created, industrial clusters being upgraded. What are we doing? Creating a plug and play. And who does it help the most? That mid-market segment, which is moving very fast. That mid-market segment, which is coming to India. And please do not forget, what India has exhibited in these 125 days is the amazing ability of India's MSME for frugal innovation. And what does that take me to? You remember 30th of March, we did not have a single PPE in India. Today, I have a run rate of 800,000 PPEs. And who did it? These were my MSMEs. They partnered with the larger firms. The ability to pivot, the ability to be nimble, the ability to be frugally innovative, that is the strength of India. And that is the strength which is in my mid-market. And that is the strength which is going to propel the growth of India and the competitiveness of India going forward. You mark it and watch. Let me give you one statistic, Rahul, and I know I may have taken more time than otherwise, but this takes me to it. You know, MSMEs have been the most hit in this entire experience. Let me give you an example of June. Collections from MSME, and remember, we are going through a period of moratorium just now, right? MSME collections in June was 65%. And let me not stop there. Microfinance collections in June started with 60%, ended with 80%. This is what is going to propel India and the new India, which is walking out of this COVID. And it's going to do it very soon. And what the government has done is providing them, you saw the entire focus on the entire monetary and fiscal package for them. Now we are trying to create the infrastructure for them. They can do the plug and play. Pawan and many others are sitting together to see how we can make India more competitive. One more point, Rahul, how we can reduce our logistics cost, which is what the only thing staying within us, between us and being globally competitive. Let me give you one example. We had an auto major who said that X factory price of his product is as competitive as anywhere else in the world. And one of the largest automakers in the world who has a factory running here. So India is there. What has happened now with this virus? You're going to see a new India, which is going to be cutting off the flab, which is now ready with its innovation, and which is being supported by the government so that it can just run fast and take it on. Thank you, Rahul.
Mr. Mukundan, what do you make of what the government has done so far in terms of cutting down dependency on China? One is to send a general message that government companies will not give tenders to China, no direct investment coming from China, then the digital surgical strike. Is that strong enough? What more economic coercion would you like to see?
See, let's just go back to this. I think if you travel back when this whole pandemic started, I think all of us suddenly realized that dependence on one source was a risk, a huge business risk. Every company was reevaluating its risk issues. And I think this has clearly provided the impetus. We are actually seeing, and I think it's absolutely right what Mr. Bagla has said, we are actually seeing a lot of interest in coming to India. I've never had 2 joint venture proposals on my table at any given point of time in a month. And they've all landed without us even going out to procure those, partners with whom we may not go ahead, we may go ahead, we may get these companies anyway on their own. That's all about the issues as we progress the business case. But reality is that I think there is an element of resilience which every company believes it must focus on. That presents a huge opportunity for people in India, including Indian companies who are already here. In the chemical sector where we are, in agrochemical sector where we are, we actually have presented a plan to government that how can we sort of take the turnover of this sector almost 3 times from its current level and become an export hub, a sourcing hub for the world. And the world is looking for alternates. And I think world itself has now decided that it is no longer one source which is going to be surviving. 1 + 1 is the minimum everybody wants. And India can be that 1 + 1. And where India is already one, it will have to sort of imagine somebody else will be getting that business too. So, and the second point which you make, Rahul, I think is I also agree with what Mr. Bagla has said. There are only few areas where I think we need to sort of improve our performance purely on competitive performance. And we know that bulk of our competitiveness suffers from 2 basic factors, which is power and logistics. If we can fix these 2, we can move forward. Then there is a speed of execution. See, one is about numbers, which is cost numbers. The speed of execution suffers because of the legislative issues which we have, the issues we have in terms of filing forms, and those things can get fixed through digitization very, very rapidly, which government is focusing on. So we do believe that this is a great opportunity for India. Government is putting all that stress and pressure to get that business here. We have a huge employment issue in India. We have to realize that our youth need employment. For that, we need to generate manufacturing sector and manufacturing industries, and we are moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, during this pandemic, a lot of people have been badly impacted. I'm sure as we come out of this, we will be coming on the other side with, as Mr. Bagla said, more fit and more able to compete in this world stage. So I think this is really the time we have to work together as one team, and we have to build together as one team. But the future also is of supply chain. Let's be clear that we cannot be, we need to be part of the global supply chain, and we need to be plugged into the global supply chain. And the future of the world is going to be economic competitiveness. And that is what countries will be known by. So we need to be a competitive place to make, and we need to be a place where we have our role in a supply chain of the world. So we are taking the right steps, and I hope that as we move forward, we'll continue with these right steps.
Mr. Kalyani, what do you make of the government banning Chinese apps? Is that what you would have liked to see as well? What more moves would you like the government to make? And on a slightly different note, how safe do you think your data is? What do you make of this emerging tech nationalism? Do you use Chinese apps yourself? How do you see this?
Well, I think, we are already on one in this conversation with the Zoom. I think, as far as...
That's an American app. Whether they're Chinese or not, they're trying to stay away from China.
Yeah, that's a debate. Anyway, the issue is, I think, in terms of national security, in terms of technology that kind of borders on influencing or penetrating where national security matters, I think, we need to be very careful in terms of what we allow and what we don't allow. And therefore, banning apps that would create security concerns going forward is the right thing to do. Also, I think what is also very important is if you look at the entire technology business today, there are only two players in the world that control technology business, or two countries in the world. One is China and one is the United States. And, a country as large as ours with 1.3 billion people, we need to create our own Google. We need to create our own technology companies that can generate the future technologies that are required. And therefore, I think this step is the step in the right direction, because a lot of young Indians who are tech savvy, who have talent, who understand this business much better than people like me, will probably create the new technology landscape for India and for Indian companies. And therefore, I think it's important that we...
There is always the fear, Mr. Goenka, of economic retribution, of China hitting back. So, okay, we're tightening the levers, as it were. We heard from the Chinese spokesperson that there will be countermeasures as well. Is that something to be scared of? Because take, for example, if in the pharmaceutical industry on APIs they cut off supplies, which hopefully they won't, that can cripple the Indian pharma sector. So how concerned are you about retribution from China? Is that in your risk factors at this moment?
Rahul, definitely that's something that we need to be concerned about. The problem is not that we import from China. The problem is that we import a lot more and we export a lot less. And therefore, China's dependence on us is not anywhere near as much as our dependence on them for our manufacturing output or our factories. And therefore, what we need to really focus on is how do we make Indian manufacturing more competitive. More than half of what we import from China is only because of lower cost. It's not that we cannot do it, it's just that our costs are higher. We talked about power, we talked about logistics. There are many other things that contribute to higher cost in India. Clearly, there are industries like you mentioned, pharmaceutical, electronics, white goods, chemicals to some extent, that have very heavy dependence on China, and China cannot be replaced overnight. Therefore, we must start a mid-term kind of effort that we cannot be be fully dependent on China, that if China stops supplies to us, then our industries will come to a stop. And that process cannot happen overnight. We cannot just switch on a light and say, we are done. It's going to take 3 to 5 years of concentrated effort in each of the industries, whether it's automotive, whether it's pharmaceutical, chemical, white goods, electronics. It can be done, but we may have to pay a short-term penalty of higher cost, a short-term penalty, because I think we can catch up once our volumes go up. India doesn't have to scale like China, and that's one of the reasons why our costs are sometimes higher. But it can be done if we put in effort to make our industry very efficient, look at all the factor costs that we have, which are driving our cost higher, and in some cases look at technology that we don't have, that China has. And again, all of these things will take some time. And again, I want to say that the efforts that are being done today are in that direction, not just trying to do some small incremental kind of change, but to look at how can we make fundamental changes to ability of Indian manufacturing to not have dependence, not just on China, but on any one country. If you're dependent on any one country, I think you are creating a risk for yourself. And that's what we should be doing, and I think it's happening. But again, I want to repeat, it's not an overnight thing. There's no way we can replace Chinese requirements, Chinese inputs to our manufacturing in a short span. I would say that we'll have to give ourselves 2 to 3 years of very focused effort to do that. And for that, the government and the industry have to work together.
Mr. Mukundan,
where we need to explain clearly what our issues are, and government needs to act on it.
Mr. Mukundan, how do you view the threat or the possibility of economic retaliation from Beijing? We know government spokespersons have been flexing their muscles, saying if you keep banning our apps, we'll come after you. And there are sectors where if China cuts the supply chain, there will be massive consequences in several Indian sectors. How concerned are you about that? What can we do in the short term? Is that a risk we have to run? Is there a way in which we can minimize that risk while we try and reduce our dependency? Mr. Mukundan?
See, in terms of all the sectors, let me also highlight it's not as if there is only one source, as Mr. Pawan Goenka highlighted. The alternate sources exist, but they may be a little bit more expensive. So I think the world has moved to what I call as resilience rather than efficiency. So we may have to pay a little bit of a higher number, or the logistics are going to be a little longer. So those issues will come in the way. But I think every sector will find its own way if there is a difficulty in sourcing for whatever reason, whether it be a medical reason, whether it be a logistical reason. I think companies will find a way. The issue for us is, in the long run, if we have to play a critical role in the supply chain of the world, I think we have to become more competitive. It is something which we have to do rather than look somewhere else. And I think we have all the means, Rahul. If you look at what we have done in fintech, let me take that as one sectoral example. Today in India, peer-to-peer money transfer is frictionless, more frictionless than any other country in the world, I can tell you. Our income tax filing, electronic filing today probably is one of the finest in the world. You pick up in even the advanced countries around the world, including US, it is more difficult than here. So I think we've done a great job of using technologies and delivering solutions which are at mass scale. And there is no reason why we cannot have tech giants out of India, which is what you mentioned. We make best drugs in the world. There is no reason why we can't be making APIs. The only reason we've not done it is fundamentally that we were very much focused on, getting the cost down. I think at some point we need to look at what is the risk involved with that efficiency approach and bring resilience in. And we also need to build scale. We cannot be building APIs for one company alone. Then we have to become a supplier of API to 10, 20 other companies. And I think we should be willing to do that. So in the long run, in my view, as world becomes more regional, this is what we are moving to, as supply chains become shorter. And I think this whole point about becoming fully reliant on oneself is very important. But at the same time, it should be open. We cannot have a closed economy going forward.
There's always a silver lining, and I think in the dragon bearing his fangs, it's come as a rude wake-up call for everyone in India, for policymakers, for corporates, for citizens, because you've seen how dangerous the dragon can be, which means even if in the short term you have to pay a little more, sacrifice or take the hit, you at least realize the imperative of not trying to pinch pennies and building for the long run, so that you can build greater resilience and you can build the idea of an Atmanirbhar Bharat. We've had a absolutely fascinating, engaging, meaningful, purposeful conversation, and for that I thank Baba Kalyani, Pawan Goenka, Mukundan and Deepak Bagla for joining us on this show on the entire spectre of India-China relations and what can we do to try and reduce our dependence. Some very, very interesting ideas emerging. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kanwal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.